Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. The Mist. Ravens Hollow had always been a quiet town, nestled deep in a valley surrounded by dense, ancient forests. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the biggest event of the year was the Fall Harvest Festival, and where children played freely in the streets without a second thought. Life was simple, peaceful, but everything changed when the mist came. At first, it seemed normal. Every autumn, a thick fog would roll in from the hills, blanketing the town in a ghostly white shroud. The locals were used to it. The older folks even said it was part of the town's charm. But this time, the mist was different. It was thicker, heavier. It lingered. Days passed, and instead of burning off with the morning sun, it only grew denser. It crept into every alley, every street, every home. Then, the disappearances began. The first to go. Old Mr. Holloway was the first. He ran the antique shop on Main Street, a cluttered little place filled with forgotten relics. One evening, his shop remained open long past closing time. The lights were still on. His radio played softly from within, but Mr. Holloway was nowhere to be found. The door was unlocked. A cup of tea sat on the counter, still warm. His cane, something he never went anywhere without, rested against the register. But there was no sign of him. The next to vanish was Emily Carter, a 7-year-old girl who had been riding her bike near the woods. A neighbor swore they saw her silhouette standing at the edge of the trees, just before the mist thickened. "I saw her turn," the neighbor said, voice trembling. "She looked right at me, and then she was gone." Her bike was found lying on its side, one wheel still spinning. Small footprints led into the mist, but none came back out. By the third night, 3 more people had vanished. The Peterson family, mother, father, and son, were last seen in their living room, watching television. Their next-door neighbor noticed their front door wide open the following morning. Inside, everything was undisturbed, breakfast plates on the table, coffee still warm in the cups. But the back door stood open, revealing the swirling mist just beyond. There were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, just empty silence. Fear takes hold. Panic set in. People stopped going outside at night. The town's once lively streets became deserted. Windows were locked. Doors were barricaded. But it made no difference. The mist was inside their homes now. It slithered through cracks in the walls, coiled under doors, seeped through vents. It was alive. Sheriff Douglas assembled a search party, but they never returned. The last transmission from his radio crackled with static before a single, breathless whisper came through. "It's not mist." The town held its breath that night, waiting for dawn. But dawn never truly came. The sun remained a pale blur behind the endless fog, casting no warmth, offering no light. And then the screaming began. The night Ravens Hollow died. It started just past midnight, muffled at first, like voices carried through water. Then they grew sharper, more agonized. A chorus of shrieks and wails filled the air, echoing through the streets. Some swore they heard their loved ones calling their names, voices of those who had already disappeared, begging for help. Few were foolish enough to answer. One man, Henry Lawson, couldn't resist. He sprinted from his house, shouting his daughter's name. His wife sobbed, pleading for him to stay inside. He didn't listen. The mist embraced him instantly. He vanished before he could even take 5 steps. His wife heard only one thing before the silence returned: a wet, gurgling whisper that was not her husband's voice. By sunrise, if it could even be called that, the town was silent. No more screams, no more people, just emptiness. The rescuers. When state authorities arrived 3 days later, Ravens Hollow was a ghost town. Not a single person remained. There were no signs of struggle, no bodies. The buildings were intact. It was as if the entire population had simply walked into the mist and disappeared. A rescue team of 5 ventured in, armed with radios and searchlights. They didn't get far. The first sign that something was wrong came when they heard the whispers. Soft at first, like the wind, then louder, familiar. One of the men, Officer Grant, froze in place, his face draining of color. "I hear my wife," he whispered. The others tried to pull him back, but it was too late. He stepped forward, into the mist. His flashlight flickered once, twice, and then he was gone. Panic took over. The remaining 4 turned and ran, their boots pounding against the pavement. They made it back to their truck, except for one. Agent Ramirez was missing. A frantic search revealed nothing. His footprints ended abruptly in the mist. His radio crackled to life one last time. "Help me." But the voice that spoke was not his. The final transmission. The remaining 3 rescuers fled Ravens Hollow. The mist seemed to follow them as they drove, curling at the edges of the road, stretching its ghostly fingers toward their truck. When they reached the highway, it finally stopped. They reported everything they saw. They tried to warn others. But Ravens Hollow was never found again. The town had vanished. In its place stood only an empty valley, shrouded in mist. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the whispers, calling, waiting. The mist remains. No one knows what it was. Some say it was a rift between worlds. Others believe the town had become cursed, swallowed by an ancient force older than time. Some even whisper that Ravens Hollow never truly existed at all, that it was nothing more than a shadow of something long forgotten. But those who drive past the valley swear they see shapes moving inside the mist. They hear voices. They feel the cold breath of something unseen against their skin. And if they listen too closely, they never leave. The mist is still out there, and it is hungry,